Maya Johnson stood in front of the grandiose courthouse, its imposing columns casting long shadows in the early morning light. Today marked a pivotal moment in her career. It was her first major case, and the weight of expectation pressed heavily on her shoulders. She took a deep breath, attempting to quell the nervous flutter in her stomach. As a black woman in a predominantly white legal landscape, Maya had faced her share of challenges, but she was determined to carve out a path for herself and, more importantly, fight for justice for her client, Jamal, a young man wrongfully accused of a crime he didn't commit. With each step towards the courtroom, memories of her mother flooded her mind. A single mother who had sacrificed everything for Maya's education. Her mother had instilled in her the belief that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle. "You can change the world, Maya," her mother used to say, her voice full of conviction. "Never let anyone tell you otherwise." But today, as she approached the heavy wooden doors, Maya felt the weight of systemic prejudice pressing down on her. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The polished wood and marble exuded an air of authority, but Maya felt a chill run down her spine as she caught sight of Judge Thomas Green. His reputation as a hard-nosed and, at times, condescending judge preceded him. She could feel his gaze piercing through her as he entered the chamber, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. It was as if he derived pleasure from undermining young attorneys like her. Maya straightened her back, reminding herself that she belonged here, just as much as anyone else. "Court is now in session," Judge Green announced, his voice booming across the room. Maya's heart raced as she took her place at the defense table, glancing at Jamal, who sat beside her, his expression a mix of anxiety and hope. She reached out and squeezed his hand, silently assuring him that they would fight together. As the hearing commenced, Maya presented her case, laying out the facts with clarity and conviction. "Your Honor, the evidence against my client is circumstantial at best," she argued, her voice steady despite the tremor of nerves. "We have witnesses who can provide alibis, and there are inconsistencies in the prosecution's narrative that cannot be ignored." But just as she began to build momentum, Judge Green interjected, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Ms. Johnson, your idealism is commendable, but this is a court of law, not a fairy tale. The jury needs concrete evidence, not wishful thinking." The condescension in his words stung like a slap, and Maya felt her composure wavering. She could see the jury's eyes darting between her and the judge, their skepticism palpable. "Your Honor, if I may," she began, only to be cut off again. "I suggest you focus on the facts rather than your emotional appeals," he retorted, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. Frustration welled up inside her, but Maya fought to keep her voice calm. How could she break through the biases entrenched in this system? Once the hearing concluded, Maya stepped out of the courtroom, her heart heavy. She felt the sting of defeat even though the fight had just begun. "Maya, hey," came a familiar voice. It was Claudia, her mentor, who had been anxiously waiting for her outside. Claudia's presence was a comfort in the midst of chaos. "How did it go?" Claudia asked, concern etched on her face. "It was tough," Maya admitted, running a hand through her hair. "Judge Green, he doesn't take me seriously." I could feel it in every word he said. Claudia studied Maya for a moment, her eyes softening with understanding. "You know, when I was starting out, I faced a lot of the same challenges. There were days I thought I wouldn't make it, but I learned to rely on the evidence and my own instincts. Keep your head up. You have the truth on your side." Maya felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. "You really think I can turn this around?" "I know you can. Just remember, every great lawyer faces adversity. It's how you respond that defines you," Claudia replied, her voice filled with encouragement. With renewed determination, Maya nodded. "I won't let him, or anyone, tear me down. Jamal deserves a chance, and I'll do everything I can to give it to him." As they parted ways, Maya felt the fire within her reigniting. She was ready to fight against the biases that threatened not just her career but the very essence of justice itself. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was prepared to face them head-on, driven by the sacrifices of her mother and the hope of a better future for her client. Maya Johnson sat at her cluttered desk, the dim light of her desk lamp casting a warm glow over the mountains of case files that surrounded her. The room was silent except for the occasional rustle of paper and the faint hum of her laptop. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, reminding her that time was slipping away as she pored over the witness statements for the case of Jamal, her client wrongfully accused of a crime he didn't commit. With every line she read, her heart raced. The inconsistencies leapt off the page like neon signs. Why would they lie? She muttered to herself, frustration bubbling up. What do they have to gain? Maya sipped her cold coffee, grimacing at the bitter taste. But the caffeine jolted her back to focus. She flipped through the pages with a fervor, analyzing every detail, every discrepancy. Hours passed like minutes, and she lost track of time as she immersed herself in the evidence. She had already sacrificed countless nights out with friends and family dinners, but she couldn't afford to let Jamal down. The stakes were too high. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. It was her best friend, Lisa, peeking through the door. "Hey, Maya, you still working? You promised you'd come to dinner with us tonight," Lisa said, concern etched on her face. "I know. I'm sorry," Maya replied, forcing a smile even as her heart sank at the thought of letting Lisa down. "I just need to finish this. I think I'm onto something with the witness statements." Lisa stepped inside, crossing her arms. "Maya, you can't keep doing this. You're going to burn out. When was the last time you took a break? You need to take care of yourself." Maya sighed, feeling the weight of her friend's concern. "I get it, but I can't stop now. Jamal is counting on me. If I don't find something that proves his innocence, he could go to prison for years. I can't let that happen. I know you're passionate about this, but you can't do it all alone," Lisa urged, her voice softening. "You have people who care about you. Lean on us a little." Maya nodded, though guilt gnawed at her. "I will. I promise. Just one more night, okay?" As Lisa left, Maya returned to her files, her resolve strengthening. In the back of her mind, she could hear Claudia's voice from their last meeting. "You have to dig deeper, Maya. The truth is often buried under layers of lies." With renewed determination, she sifted through the documents again, searching for that elusive piece of evidence that could turn the case around. The next day, Maya found herself in a small, dimly lit diner, sitting across from a key witness, a jittery man named Curtis. He fidgeted with the sugar packets on the table, glancing around as if expecting someone to jump out at any moment. "Thank you for meeting me, Curtis," Maya said, leaning in to show her sincerity. "I know this is a tough situation for you, but your testimony could help Jamal immensely." Curtis hesitated, his eyes darting nervously. "I don't know, Ms. Johnson. What if they find out I talked to you? I could get hurt." Maya leaned back, giving him space. "I understand your fear, but think about Jamal. If you don't come forward, an innocent man could go to jail. We need to stand up against this injustice together." He looked down, biting his lip. "I saw things that night, things that could help, but I don't want to be a target. The people involved are dangerous." Maya's heart raced. "I can assure you that we will do everything to protect you, but we need your help. Please, Curtis. You have the power to change the outcome of this trial." After a long pause, Curtis took a deep breath and finally nodded. "Okay, I'll tell you what I know." As he spoke, Maya's heart pounded. The information he provided was crucial, revealing details that could dismantle the prosecution's case. Yet, she could sense the fear emanating from him, an echo of the risks that loomed over them both. She felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, knowing that seeking justice often came with a price. Back in the courtroom, Maya stood before Judge Green, ready to present the new evidence. She felt a flicker of hope as she laid out Curtis's testimony, her voice steady despite the tremors of doubt that coursed through her. "Your Honor, this testimony from a credible witness directly contradicts the prosecution's claims," she argued, her eyes focused on the judge. "It presents a clear narrative that proves my client's innocence." Judge Green leaned back in his chair, a skeptical expression crossing his face. "And what makes this witness credible, Ms. Johnson? It seems to me you're relying on hearsay." A wave of disappointment crashed over her as she felt the sting of his dismissal. "Your Honor, I assure you, This isn't hearsay. This is evidence that could exonerate my client. Objection sustained, Green retorted, his tone dismissive. You need to provide more substantial proof if you expect this court to take your claims seriously. Maya felt crushed. The courtroom seemed to close in on her, the weight of systemic bias pressing down heavily. She clenched her fists, steeling herself for the battle ahead. She wouldn't give up. She couldn't. Jamal's life depended on her, and she was determined to fight for justice, no matter the obstacles in her path. Maya leaned back in her chair, staring at the piles of case files scattered across her desk. The dim light of her office illuminated the determined lines etched on her face. She had spent countless hours poring over witness statements and police reports, desperately trying to find a thread of hope in the chaos surrounding Jamal's case. Her fingers brushed over a map of the neighborhood where the crime had occurred, and she felt a surge of determination. She needed to understand the systemic issues that plagued this community, the very issues that had led to the wrongful accusation of her client. Determined to turn the tide, she grabbed her phone and dialed the number of a local community activist, Malik, who had been vocal about police misconduct. As the phone rang, she thought about the risks involved in reaching out to someone from the community. Would they welcome her, or view her as just another attorney looking to exploit their struggles for personal gain? Hello? Malik's voice came through, cautious yet curious. Malik, this is Maya Johnson, the attorney representing Jamal. She introduced herself, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. I'm looking into the patterns of police misconduct in the neighborhood. I believe it could help my case. Why do you care? Malik's tone was skeptical. A lot of folks around here don't trust lawyers. We've been burned too many times. I understand, Maya replied, her heart racing, but I genuinely want to help. Jamal is innocent, and I need to uncover the truth. Can we meet? There was a pause before Malik spoke again. Fine. Meet me at the community center tomorrow afternoon. But I'm not promising anything. Maya smiled, feeling a flicker of hope. Thank you, Malik. I appreciate it. The next afternoon, Maya arrived at the community center, a modest building that buzzed with life. Children played in the courtyard, while adults engaged in animated discussions inside. She spotted Malik leaning against a wall, arms crossed, observing the scene with a watchful eye. Thanks for meeting me, Maya said, extending her hand. Malik hesitated before shaking it, his grip firm. You're lucky I'm even here, he said, leading her into a quieter space. We've seen too many lawyers come and go, promising change but delivering nothing. Maya took a deep breath, aware of the weight of his words. I'm not here to make promises. I want to hear your stories, the real stories of what's happening in this community. As they spoke, Malik shared harrowing accounts of police brutality and racial profiling. Each story resonated with Maya, fueling her resolve. She realized that the biases she faced in the courtroom were mirrored in the experiences of those she was trying to help. The systemic issues ran deeper than she had initially understood. We've had enough. Malik's voice rose with passion. But what can one attorney do against a corrupt system? I can fight for justice, Maya declared, her voice unwavering. But I need your help to gather evidence, to bring these stories to light. Together, we can show the world the truth. Malik studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, we'll see what we can do. But be warned, some people won't take kindly to our digging. As Maya left the community center, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer just fighting for Jamal. She was fighting for a community that had been silenced for too long. Back in the courtroom days later, Maya stood before Judge Green, her heart pounding. She had spent the night compiling the evidence she and Malik had gathered, and she was ready to present it. Her hands trembled slightly as she organized her notes, but she steadied herself, breathing deeply. Your Honor, I would like to present new evidence that highlights patterns of misconduct by the police in this neighborhood, she stated, her voice clear and firm. Judge Green raised an eyebrow, his expression skeptical. Is this the same evidence that was deemed inadmissible last week, Ms. Johnson? No, Your Honor, Maya replied, her determination unwavering. This is new information that directly relates to the credibility of the witnesses against my client. The judge leaned back in his chair, his disdain palpable. And what makes you think this evidence is credible? Maya felt a rush of frustration. Because, Your Honor, it comes from the voices of the community, people who have lived through these injustices. They cannot be silenced any longer. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, and Maya could feel the tension mounting. She glanced at Jamal, who looked at her with hope and fear in his eyes. She had to push through, to fight for him and the community that had rallied behind her cause. Ms. Johnson, Judge Green interrupted, his tone dripping with condescension. While your passion is commendable, it does not substitute for tangible evidence. I will not allow this courtroom to become a platform for community grievances. Maya's heart raced. But, Your Honor, these grievances are the foundation of the injustice we're fighting against. If we don't address the biases within our system, how can we seek true justice? The courtroom fell silent, all eyes on Maya. She felt the weight of their expectations on her shoulders. Would she really be able to challenge the very system designed to uphold justice? Doubt crept in as she faced the judge's cold stare. In that moment, she questioned whether she could truly win this fight. Maya sat in the dim light of her small office, the walls lined with legal books and framed photographs that chronicled her journey. She rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her. The tension from the trial had seeped into her personal life, creating fissures in her relationships that were becoming harder to ignore. Her phone buzzed, lighting up with a text from her mother. Maya, are you sure this is the right career for you? You can always come home. Maya sighed, the familiar pang of guilt stirring within her. Her mother had worked tirelessly to provide her with opportunities, and now, as she faced insurmountable odds in the courtroom, doubt crept in. What if she's right? Maya thought, her heart heavy. She longed to reassure her mother, to say that everything would be okay. But the truth was, she didn't know. As she stared blankly at the case files before her, her mind drifted to Caleb, her boyfriend, who had been increasingly frustrated with her absences and emotional distance. You're never around anymore, Maya. It's like you care more about this case than us, he had said during their last conversation, his voice a mixture of hurt and anger. The memory stung, and she felt her resolve waver. Just then, her phone chimed again. This time, it was Claudia. Maya, I know you're deep in it, but remember why you started this fight. Don't lose yourself in the process. The words hung in the air, a lifeline amidst her growing fears. She thought of her mother's sacrifices, the late nights spent studying, the unyielding support that had propelled her to this point. With renewed determination, she set aside her self-doubt, focusing on the task at hand. Days passed, and the trial continued, each session more draining than the last. Maya had become accustomed to Judge Green's dismissive remarks, but they never failed to infuriate her. Your Honor, I believe that, Ms. Johnson, let's stick to facts, shall we? Green interrupted, a smug smile on his face. The jury exchanged glances, some rolling their eyes, others appearing sympathetic but powerless to intervene. Each interruption chipped away at her confidence, but Maya refused to let it break her spirit. One afternoon, while going through old case files at the courthouse, Maya found a crumpled piece of paper tucked between pages. It was an anonymous tip about Detective Mason, a name she recognized from the case. She read the note, her heart racing as the words revealed a history of corruption and misconduct. This could change everything, she whispered to herself, a mix of excitement and trepidation flooding her. Determined to uncover the truth, Maya dove into her investigation, reaching out to former colleagues of Mason's. The deeper she dug, the more she realized the extent of the misconduct involved in her case. She spoke with a former officer who had seen Mason fabricate evidence, his voice shaking as he recounted the events. I was scared, Maya. They have a way of making you disappear if you get in their way, he warned, glancing around nervously. I understand, but this is bigger than us. We need to bring this to light, Maya replied, her resolve hardening. As she pieced together the evidence, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Shadows loomed larger, and she sensed the tension in the air. But the thought of Jamal, an innocent young man, kept her going. She thought of his mother, whose eyes pleaded for justice, and it fueled her fire. Finally, the day arrived when Maya felt ready to confront Green. Her heart raced as she sat at the defense table, the weight of the impending confrontation heavy on her shoulders. She recalled the faces of those who had suffered under the system, those who had been silenced. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady, "I have evidence that implicates Detective Mason in a series of misconducts related to this case, and I believe this evidence directly affects the credibility of the prosecution's arguments." Green's expression turned icy, and the courtroom fell silent. "Ms. Johnson, you tread on dangerous ground. Are you sure you want to proceed with this?" "I have to, Your Honor. For the sake of justice," she replied, her determination unwavering. Green's eyes narrowed, his anger palpable. "You will regret this," he warned, leaning forward, his voice a low growl. Maya felt a shiver run down her spine, but she stood her ground, aware of the risks but unwilling to back down. The courtroom buzzed with tension, and she knew this moment could change everything, not just for Jamal, but for the entire system. As the scene unfolded, Maya was acutely aware of the stakes. She could feel the weight of every gaze upon her, the scrutiny of the jury, the curiosity of the gallery. But in that moment, she felt more alive than ever, fueled by the knowledge that she was fighting not only for justice, but for the many voices that had been silenced before her. Maya Johnson paced the dimly lit office, her heart racing as she prepared for a pivotal meeting with Lisa, a seasoned investigative journalist known for her fierce dedication to uncovering the truth. The walls, adorned with newspaper clippings of her past successes, felt both inspiring and intimidating. Maya's mind raced with thoughts of the evidence she had gathered against Judge Green, but she knew she needed more. More voices, more stories, more proof that systemic bias wasn't just an isolated issue but a pervasive reality. The door creaked open, and Lisa walked in, her presence commanding immediate respect. With her sharp eyes and confident posture, she exuded an aura of authority that Maya desperately needed. "You ready for this?" Lisa asked, her tone a mix of encouragement and seriousness. Maya nodded, trying to quell the butterflies in her stomach. "I've got testimonies from several people who've faced Green's biases. They're scared, but if we can show that this isn't just about Jamal, we might have a chance." "Let's get to work then," Lisa replied, pulling out her laptop. "We need to craft a narrative that resonates. This isn't just your fight. It's about the community." They spent hours poring over documents and drafting a compelling narrative, piecing together the stories of individuals whose lives had been affected by Green's prejudices. Maya shared the accounts of witnesses who had hesitated to come forward due to fear of retribution, their voices trembling with the weight of their experiences. "People need to see that this is a pattern," Lisa said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "If we can show how Green's actions have impacted lives, it could sway public opinion. They can't ignore a full picture." As they worked, Maya felt a surge of hope. She was no longer alone in this battle. Lisa's expertise and determination were a balm to her frayed nerves. The sun began to set outside, casting a warm glow through the window, and Maya felt the weight of the world lift slightly from her shoulders. But as they neared the completion of their project, the atmosphere shifted. Maya received an anonymous message on her phone, a warning to stop pursuing the case. "Maya, you need to be careful," Lisa cautioned, her voice low and serious. "This is getting dangerous." "I can't back down now," Maya replied, determination flooding her tone. "Jamal deserves justice, and if I can shed light on Green's corruption, I have to try." Days passed, and the pressure intensified as the trial approached its climax. Maya's phone buzzed with notifications of threats, each one more alarming than the last. She felt the weight of fear creeping in, but she found solace in the support of her community. They rallied around her, offering not just encouragement but also protection. "Don't let them intimidate you, Maya," one of the activists said, their voice steady and reassuring. "You're doing this for all of us. We've got your back." With their support, Maya steeled herself for the upcoming court session, where she would present the evidence she had gathered alongside Lisa's investigation. As she walked into the courtroom, she felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. The atmosphere was thick with tension. She could feel the eyes of the jury on her. "Your Honor, if I may present new evidence," Maya began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She laid out the testimonies, each one a thread in the fabric of injustice woven by Green. Judge Green leaned back in his chair, a scowl etched across his face. "This is irrelevant, Ms. Johnson," he snapped, attempting to dismiss her claims with a wave of his hand. But the jury was visibly shaken, murmurs rippling through the room as Maya continued. "This isn't just about my client. This is about a system that has failed countless individuals," Maya declared, her voice rising with conviction. "This is about a judge who has abused his power and silenced those who dared to speak out. We cannot allow this to continue." As she spoke, she could feel the energy in the room shift. The jurors leaned forward, their expressions shifting from skepticism to concern. For the first time, Maya felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, change was on the horizon. The fight was far from over, but in that moment, she knew that they were beginning to listen. As the jury deliberated, an electrifying tension filled the courtroom, thick enough to cut with a knife. Maya Johnson sat at the defense table, her heart racing as she exchanged glances with Jamal, who sat beside her, his expression a mix of hope and fear. The clock ticked loudly in the background, each second feeling like an eternity. Just as she began to lose herself in anxious thoughts, her phone buzzed discreetly in her pocket. Maya glanced around the courtroom, ensuring the judge was preoccupied. She pulled the phone out and saw Lisa's name flashing on the screen. Pressing the button to accept the call, she held the phone to her ear. "Lisa, what's going on?" "Maya, the story about Green's corruption is going viral." Lisa's voice crackled with excitement. "People are outraged. Social media is exploding with support for Jamal, and the news outlets are picking it up. You're not just fighting for Jamal anymore. You're fighting for accountability in the legal system. This could change everything." Maya felt a rush of empowerment flood through her. "This is incredible, Lisa, but we still have to wait for the jury. They could—" I know. But just remember, no matter what happens in that room, you've already made a difference. You've shown people that they can stand up against injustice. Stay strong." With a renewed sense of purpose, Maya hung up the call. She turned her gaze back to Jamal, who was watching her intently. "We're not done yet," she said softly, squeezing his hand. He nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. Minutes later, the jury returned, and the courtroom fell silent as they filed back into their seats. Judge Green looked at them expectantly, his expression unreadable. Maya could feel the weight of every eye in the room focused on the jurors. "The jury has reached a verdict," the foreman announced, his voice steady. "In the matter of the state versus Jamal Carter, we find the defendant not guilty." The words hung in the air for a moment before an eruption of relief and joy filled the courtroom. Maya could hardly believe it. Tears brimmed in her eyes as she turned to Jamal, who was grinning from ear to ear, disbelief etched on his face. They embraced tightly, her heart swelling with pride for the young man who had endured so much. But just as the celebration began, a commotion erupted at the back of the courtroom. Maya turned to see a former court employee, a woman named Clara, pushing her way through the crowd. Clara was shaking, her voice trembling as she called out, "I have something to say." Judge Green's face twisted in irritation, and he barked, "This is highly inappropriate. You will be removed from this courtroom." But Clara pressed on, "No, you have to listen. I can't stay silent anymore. I worked for Judge Green for years, and I've seen the way he manipulates cases and twists the truth. He's been biased against people of color for as long as I can remember. It's time someone spoke up." Maya felt her breath hitch in her throat as she processed what was happening. The courtroom, still buzzing from the verdict, grew silent once more as all eyes turned to Clara, who stood tall, her voice steady now. "I have documents, evidence of his misconduct. I can't let another innocent person suffer because of his corruption." Judge Green's face blanched, his anger palpable as he shouted, "You're lying. This is a disgrace." But the judge's protests fell on deaf ears as Clara continued to speak, her voice rising with fervor. "I'm not lying. I've seen him threaten witnesses, bribe officials, and undermine justice for his own gain. This is about more than just Jamal. It's about the integrity of our entire system." Just then, the sound of sirens filled the air, and the doors swung open to reveal police officers rushing in. Maya's heart raced as she realized they were here for Green. They approached the judge, who stood frozen, disbelief written on his face. "Judge Thomas Green, you're under arrest for corruption and abuse of power," one of the officers declared. As the officers placed handcuffs on him, Maya felt a wave of triumph wash over her. Justice was not only served for Jamal, but also for all those who had suffered under Green's reign of bias and corruption. When the courtroom erupted in applause and cheers, Maya stood firm, her chest swelling with pride. She had fought against the odds and emerged victorious, not just for her client, but for a system in desperate need of reform. As she looked out at the crowd, she saw her community rallying behind her, their faces filled with hope and solidarity. Days later, as Maya received a prestigious award for her courage and commitment to justice, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The fight was far from over, but she knew that change was possible. In that moment, surrounded by supportive faces, Maya vowed to continue her work, ensuring that justice would prevail, no matter the obstacles ahead.